if you think that the hatred of the Second Amendment is intense, guns are worthless now, you can't overthrow the government, and even if you could, that would be bad too. So like nobody needs these things. They do nothing but ill. They're evil. We should just get rid of them. If you think the hatred for the Second Amendment is bad, wait until people figure out that what we're going to be talking about for the next 5 to 10 years is a Second Amendment for compute. Americans need and have a natural right to the free use of our most powerful digital technologies to freely associate and to create commercial and cultural value. Period.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Moment of Truth, the podcast of American Moment. My name is Saurabh Sharma, and I'm here with another solo episode, and this one was really for the best. Even if Nick could make it today, we thought it'd be prudent that he doesn't, because I had on today one of the most interesting but galaxy brain figures in American life, one would say. We had on today the great James Poulos. Before I get to what he's all about, as always, make sure to go to AmericanMoment.org. There you can find everything we have cooking, back episodes of this podcast, the events that we're hosting, and more. It's always a good time, and there's always new stuff that we have cooking. Be sure to rate and review this podcast. 5 stars really helps us in the rankings, and it makes it so that we can more conscionably bring all of these fantastic guests to you. Today we had on James Poulos, who we've been trying to have on for some time now, but he's always just teleporting into DC and teleporting out. He's never here for very long, but he was here for quite some time this last week, and so we got to sit down with him and tape an episode, I guess putatively about his book Human Forever, but really about him the man. And I'll put my cards on the table here. I think that if there is one person at the intersection of cultural, political, philosophical life that is likely to be read positively in 100 years that I know of today, it's James. It's sort of an asymmetric bet. Again, there can only be one, maybe 2 people alive today that will carry that distinction at some point. My bet's on James. And so that's why I'm a proud owner of his book, Human Forever. And for those of you in the know, this is one of only 100 copies of the hardcover. Spent some of that line go up Bitcoin in order to get it. And James makes no sense. He is exceptionally erudite and brilliant, but I know that a lot of the concepts that he talks about are often a little bit difficult to wrap your head around, and that's partially why we did this podcast episode. I don't know that we completely succeeded, but you're in for a very interesting, biographical account of James Poulos. He's probably the most interesting person employed by any think tank in America, and it's not close. But also his understanding of the spiritual war that we are in with technology and how one can stay human forever. I highly recommend you guys listen through. It was a treat to tape with him. And thank you guys for listening as always. We'll go now to James Poulos. James, thank you for coming on the podcast.
Sorry, I'm good to be here.
We have a lot to talk about today. I'm very excited, been excited to do this episode for probably 6 months now. But first, I think it is helpful and illustrative for people to know where you came from. How did you end up being the Dr. James Poulos of notoriety and fame that you are today? Walk us through that trajectory from when you were a babe. Where'd you grow up? Where'd you come from?
Well, when a man and woman love each other very much. In my case, it was a suburb of Detroit, Michigan. In the year Julian Assange calls year 0, 1979.
Okay.
Which, by law, I had to be a Smashing Pumpkins fan, I think is the way that it worked. And I checked that box for many years. Born outside Detroit, the family exited the area when I was about 4 years old. I distinctly remember forming my hatred of cold weather the day of moving out, just sort of stuck to the window watching the movers sort of pile everything into the house, vacate the house. I was very sad the night before. I was going around saying goodbye to every room in the house and then goodbye to all of my belongings. And my parents had to inform me that the stuff was coming with me. So that was a nice consolation, but it was still very cold. It was about 0 degrees. The movers took the Rocky Mountain route, and we took the southerly route through Texas. A very long drive. It seemed even longer when you're, that size. And when we arrived and met up again in the San Francisco Bay Area before it became what we know it to be today, we discovered they had lashed the mattresses to the back of the moving vans and driven through the Rockies in the snow. So my father was dismayed, and for the first of many occasions, he gave the transgressors a piece of his mind. And so as I grew up, I learned that it was more or less impossible for me to win an argument, and with the heated passions involved. And so I found myself flowing into other channels, creative ones, as well as sort of how to reason your way out from under someone's frustration. And I guess those two things gradually merged together. It was difficult for a number of years. I was too, I don't know, artsy for the smart kids and too smart for the artsy kids. And it was the 90s, and there was like a hard fork. It was like, you wear green corduroys from the thrift store and you chain smoke cigarettes behind the portables and you're bi, or you do act deck and you are valedictorian, and neither of those really did it for me. And it took some time to realize that the cultural and artistic figures who I admired the most, and who I wanted to imitate in certain ways, were the end of an era, and the hope of sort of taking your place in that parade was one that was just going to be dashed for a whole generation. There was no sort of like there was no path anymore to being a well-paid, high-concept, creative figure influencing the culture the way that there was at that time. For creative millennials of a certain stripe, in and around LA, especially New York, their sort of moment of hitting the wall was, yeah, I'm sorry, but you're white, so you're not going to really work for at least a year and possibly more. But in my case, it didn't have to do with race or class or gender. It had to do with this sort of moment of exhaustion that came around the millennium, where it appeared that the rising generations simply didn't know how to do things like write real novels or make concept records. I know there are always exceptions. People are, oh, but Godspeed You Black Emperor, whatever. I know there are exceptions.
And is this from the vantage point of a millennial, a Gen Xer? What do you identify?
Well, as? 79 is Xennial. So once again,
so made up word.
I'm
okay,
a man
great.
Without a country. That's right. And so I tried the novelist thing and convinced Bret Easton Ellis to read my manuscript. It was, it fit in a Kinko's by a ream of paper. And we were sending manuscript copies back and forth, and he was like editing them. And then 9/11 happened and sort of destroyed the conceit of my novel, which was about rock stars and terrorists. Osama bin Laden was like on page 35. And,
oh no.
yeah. And suddenly it was like, I don't know how to make this work anymore. Nobody knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
It was 9/11, and then it was anthrax, and it was just like, you couldn't really do that anymore, until further notice. And so I went to law school, foolishly, moped around the house, self-medicated by writing songs, which was something I'd been doing for a number of years. And the day finally comes when I get the knock on the door from the like type A upstairs neighbor who I was warned not to block in the driveway. I think she was about 30, 32 at the time. Knock, 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 knock. Answer the door. And she goes, was that you? And I was like, I'm really sorry. Like, it's been a bad week. You know, I think I might not want to go to law school anymore, but I'm not allowed to quit because that would bring, you know, disgrace upon myself and my family. And she goes, no, I don't care about that. Like, was that you like playing and singing? And I'm like, well, yes, you know, again, I'm sorry if I was loud. And she's like, I sat on your doorstep for 5 minutes. I don't do that. And I'm like, where is this going? She goes, do you know who I am? And I go, yeah, you're the lady upstairs. So I'm not supposed to like piss off, basically. And she goes, no, like, I'm the music director of Rolling Stone. And I'm like, okay. She's like, who are you working with? I was like, I don't understand the question. And so by the end of the week, she was forming me a band, and she was managing the band, and she was, you know, used to date the second guitarist from Radiohead, and so she was like, Pat, I'm gonna get us a demo, and we went to Malibu and cut a demo, and, you know, in a studio where like Neil Diamond and Korn had both recorded, I think, their first records. Onto 2-inch tape. You know, it was the very final gasp of that whole era.
So
and
90s.
so I mean, at this point it was 2003. So yeah. I was basically the West Coast Brandon Flowers.
Yeah.
Right down to like the DIY armband and the vest and the flat iron hair and the guy liner and all the rest. When I finally did meet him last time I was in New York, I was at Govball and sort of got to sneak around in the back and sort of met the Killers, and I met Brandon at the Soho Hotel after the show, and you know, his shirt was buttoned down to here and mine was buttoned down to here, and he laughed at the fact that he had like 3 chest hairs and I had like 300 chest hairs.
Greek power.
Very, I know, very sweet guy. Very sweet guy. Anyway, so things were looking pretty good for a minute, you know, rebounding from like being the next sort of Brett to being the next Brandon. But no, I graduated law school, took a sort of celebratory trip to Hawaii with the family, and got the call from the manager. Hey, you know, I'm really sorry, but I'm moving to New York with her boyfriend, who's also named James, who was about twice as tall as I was. Model, British, no green card, cast on one of the network soaps. So, you know, I'll try to do what I can from here, but like, good luck. And then I knew I was really in trouble because law school was terrible, and I didn't want to take the bar exam, but I had to take the bar exam. And I didn't want to take the bar because I sucked at all the bar courses. All the non-bar courses were great. You know, con law, and, you know, like, this is awesome. Entertainment law, national security law. I loved all that stuff. Yeah. But the bar does not care about that, because the bar is there to thin the herd. The state of California admits way too many people on purpose. It's like the airlines; they overbook you, and then they just sort of weed you out. And the way they weed you out is with the longest bar exam in the world, in the cosmos. Oh 3 days, 3-day bar exam. Failed it by 10 points. Missed it by that much.
10 points out of
I don't know, a lot of points.
Okay, many points.
It was a sad performance, but it was instructive. There was no contracts essay on the exam, and I knew that there would be on the next one, and I knew that I would fail even harder than I did the first time. So for all the pain and suffering and all the loans, it was freeing, because I knew that that at last I could go back to the path that it seemed I was supposed to be on. I did undergrad in 3 years, just sort of ran the table on AP tests. It was like the last year before they decided to say no to that.
Sorry, you went back and did undergrad again?
No. So
okay, you had, yeah.
Back in time a few years to 2000.
Yeah.
I had done that, you know, very, very overachieving lad. And I then took the 4th year to write the novel. Instead of going to DC to be, you know, a member of the blob, to be a deep stater. That was plan A. And so by the time 2005 rolled around, I thought, like, well, maybe, you know, I'll go to Washington, but instead of being a deep stater, I'll be a professor of political science.
Oh my God.
I know. So I stopped flat ironing the hair. I wiped off the guy liner. I had to relearn how to like stand up straight instead of like.
Hey, there's a lot more of that
the
in
hipster
DC now.
slouch. I know.
Yeah. You just waited it out.
The pain of being ahead of your time is real. Got out there, applied only to DC schools for grad school. Worked some truly horrifying JD but no bar credential jobs. But even then, those were, it's like $50 an hour plus overtime, which was pretty good if you're rolling in with like a few boxes, not suitcases of clothes that were shipped media mail, and a few pennies. And so sort of got on my feet and had a little extra time waiting for those applications to come back. And I thought that I would start a blog. And that turned out to be a good idea. Like the first in like 3 years. Started a blog, Postmodern Conservative. I got the .com for that.
Very nice.
Even though it was
still have it?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think it's out there. So it went like Blogspot to Typepad to something else. And so I started blogging, and to my surprise and delight, there were other young men of ambition out there who themselves were starting their own blogs. And within in hindsight, a pretty amusingly brief period of time, I was on the cocktail circuit, like on the come up with all the bloggers, that whole generation, some of whom are now,
what years would this have been? 2007?
This was 2005 and 6 and 7, and then I was actually hired to be the politics editor of a new media company, alongside a couple guys who went on to write for The Atlantic and Reason. We had a little posse going, and it was very exciting, and we were publishing everyone, and we had a big budget for no apparent reason, and burned through a lot of money, and
to be a media company
and tried
in the
not
late
to
2000s.
think. Yeah, well, I mean, I think that the statute of limitations has passed, so I'll tell this story. The financial crisis hit, with less than 12 months on the job, and we were all expecting that the money would be gone, and we'd come into the office one day and they'd be like, it was a scam. Like, and now it's over. Thank you for your service. But it didn't happen. And a couple of weeks in, we thought that we would survive, that we'd somehow make it through, and the money would run out in some other way. And sure enough, we were indeed all fired. And we thought that it was because of money reasons. But in fact, it was because sort of the celebrity co-founder behind the project sent a drunken 3 a.m. email reply to the angel investor. And the angel said, like, well, now you have nothing. So it's been real. And it was real. And I was out on the street again, so to speak, sitting at the Watergate bar with a young, I guess, Ross Douthat. And he goes, James, everyone knows who you are, but nobody knows what you're for. And I thought about that, and I found a few other media jobs, but it was, the post financial crisis world was pretty sad, and I just had my son, and you got a little kid, and you're suddenly not in DuPont Circle anymore. You're in Falls Church, Virginia, and it's like the biggest blizzard since Thomas Jefferson, and it took him 2 weeks to plow the streets, and like the gas was out, and it felt like time to go back to California, back to LA.
Your hatred of cold weather was vindicated.
It was. It sucks. I don't, to this day, like, I don't understand. I go to Texas, and I was like, when are you moving to Texas? Goes, come on. And I'm like, your AC is cranked so high that it's like more uncomfortable indoors than it is outdoors.
You've completely James Poulos is meant for the Mediterranean.
Yes, it matters. Yeah. I mean, you look at the Mediterranean, and it's all liqueurs and wine, and there's like no beer and no liquor, and that's as it should be, I think, the via media. So it's back to LA, older, wiser, an adult, a father. sort of try to resuscitate the novel, maybe turn it into like a TV pilot. It's this weird sort of like the Obama sort of moment when the smartphone is beginning to take over, and nobody knows really what is about to happen to them. The digital swarm has not yet fully engulfed the world, and yet the bloom was not entirely off the new media rose. So I became sort of the token, the diversity hire at the Huffington Post, which was starting their live online video wing, HuffPost Live, and basically just booking guests and producing segments, which we did through Google Chat basically. And once again, the money's coming from somewhere, and you sort of working with friends and hiring friends out from DC, and feeling reasonably cool again. Like Snapchat appears, Vice comes to LA, the energy is morphing into something meaningful, and there weren't a ton of kind of self-described libertarians who were perhaps a bit more based than that, but there was no word for that in those days. But nevertheless, the left was more interesting then, much more accommodating and much more risk-taking, and a little scene of kind of heterodox leftists started to grow up around the LA of those years. Some of the Vice guys, Oliver Stone and his circle, Glenn Greenwald, although he wasn't, necessarily physically present in LA, he was kind of in that scene. Young Turks, and Michael Hastings.
Yeah.
So, I was like at Coachella with Michael Hastings, sort of like doing the thing. Never got the invite to Oliver Stone's. And definitely didn't get the invite to Oliver Stone's because Hastings was snuffed out, which was shocking. And I still feel disinclined to share details about that episode. But it was eye-opening, and it broke the back of that scene. The last kind of piece of meaning that I was able to carry away from that era was the Young Turks were looking for a token to come on the show and kind of be the token guy who's not a lefty. And so they asked Glenn, and Glenn goes like, "Oh, you like Call Up James? Like he's local, he looks like he deserves to be there in some way," which is kind of a backhanded compliment, television. And so they bring me on, and I'm kind of like a semi-regular on the Young Turks. And they were actually really nice, as what's his name from LCD Sound System says. And we did some shows, and we had a good time. And so I really owe Glenn a pretty big, he did me a real solid there, because everything was sort of melting, and then there was this one kind of lifeline. So the Young Turks thing turned into a call from Russell Brand. Hey, we're doing rehearsals for the Russell Brand show on FX. Do you want to come do the rehearsals and be like the rehearsal guest star? So we did like 3 or 4 shows in these theaters in LA, and it was him the whole time. Matt Stoller was producing, sort of writing all the segments. And I would come up and like sort of be like a weirder version of my ordinary self, and do like the witty banter with Rusty Rockets. And now it's 2022, and people are saying Russell Brand is based, and Glenn Greenwald is writing for Sohrab, and it's been fascinating to see everything come full circle.
Yeah, it's all the same people.
Yeah,
it's all the same people. So you end up doing those shows, and then you end up kind of coming back into formal political world. Claremont Institute. You write a book about politics. How'd that happen?
So, sure enough, HuffPost Live was shut down. They wanted to fly me out to New York and have me, basically they're like, LA's doing so great, you guys. You're like half the staff and half the hours is New York, but you're producing like twice the clicks, like twice the eyeballs. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our favorites from the LA team and we're going to move you to DC and we're going to just fire everyone else. It's going to be great. And I had seen this movie before and I could smell the stench of death beginning to rise. And they were making promises. I was like, you know what? I am going to pass. And pass I did. And entered into the wonderful world of freelancing. I felt that as a family man, I did not have the option of returning to a place like Washington, D.C. I started writing what there was to write. And some of those gigs were pretty lucrative and some of them were very depressing and humiliating. But no one could tell the difference from the outside. And it gave me enough sort of head space and headroom that when I got a call from an agent in New York saying, hey, I've been looking for someone to write a book on Alexis de Tocqueville and talk to a couple of people and your name keeps coming up, are you interested? And that was going to be the subject of my dissertation at Georgetown. I had the committee lined up. I had the proposal accepted. 2008 had come along, and Josh Mitchell, who has gone on to great intellectual fame, at least in my circles, he's brilliant. Sat me down.
Future guest on this podcast.
I should hope
trying
so.
to book it for some time.
No, he's squirrely, but he's worth chasing down. Josh says, James, something very terrible is happening in academia. I don't know what it is or how long it's going to last. You seem to have a good thing going as a writer. Don't be afraid to run. That's just the way that he spoke and that he speaks. This is the guy who would say in the middle of a lecture, academia is the last feudal institution in America. Find your feudal lord. He will protect you. And he was right, but not even he could protect me from Wall Street. And so I did run back to LA, as I had said. And so I felt that I had the opportunity, not just to at last write a book, but to, maybe salvage what was left of my grad school experience. So I wrote the book, The Art of Being Free. It was really about the 90s and about Tocqueville secondarily. Once again, kind of ahead of the curve a bit. A few years before that, I had been commissioned by Jonah Goldberg, none less than Jonah himself, to contribute to an edited volume of young conservative authors. I have been called a rising conservative voice. I
think our friend Nate
two separate
posted the list of the people, and it's funny to see. I think Helen was part of it.
Oh yeah,
Michael
Kerchick was in there. Doherty.
Yeah.
It's all the same people, just over and over again. So as someone who David Brooks called a rising conservative voice in two columns, 10 years apart. I was, at that time a young conservative voice. Wrote my chapter for Jonah, and that was basically about Fight Club. When I was living in LA for the first time, writing the novel in 2001, I discovered belatedly that I was actually living in the apartment building that is in Fight Club, where his apartment explodes. I was like one floor up and a few units over. In the movie, he says it was a filing cabinet for widows and young professionals. The walls were made of concrete. It's true. It's all true. It's called Pearson Towers in the movie. In reality, it's Promenade Towers, just up at First and Figueroa. A landmark that, for some reason, it doesn't have there's no plaque there, not like a pile of flowers at the base of the building. But it was there, and I was there. And so I wrote this, this red-pilled essay about Fight Club in a Jonah Goldberg volume, and nobody read it, and nobody read the book, and it's probably worth something now. And so ahead of the curve on that, ahead of the curve on the 90s Tocqueville book. But it was a big five. We're now, I think, down to big two publishing firms. They're all, sort of Germans just infiltrating. St. Martin's put it out.
I know what that reference means.
Yes, you do.
We have a mutual friend who explained to me what exactly the publishing houses are at this point.
Yes. I think one of the heads, had died under unnatural circumstances, and they immediately consolidated. Anyway, Did the book. St. Martin's put it out. St. Martin's was fine. The process was not the horror that it is now, where it's like, you refer to someone as fat on page 283, and you may, we're holding the book until you make these. It wasn't that. The editing process was fine. The main problem was zero promotion, zero marketing, zero budget. As so many authors, sort of come to discover. It's like, your first time might hurt a little, and this is true. And so I had to do my own publicity tour. I had to do my own book sort of appearances. I did DC, I did Austin, I did New York, I did LA, I did, I don't know, somewhere else, Charlottesville. It all looked like a success. It felt like a success. The book came out on inauguration weekend of 2017. Wow. So it was on all the end caps of all the Barnes and Nobles in all the world, sandwiched between like Taibbi's book on Hillary Clinton and the first wave of Trump books. And so it was there for people to buy, and it did okay for what it was. But it was a call to reject the temptations of insanity. It was really an analysis of Tocqueville, which said, look, American life is inherently decentered. We are constitutively crazy, restless people. And a lot of this came from Mitchell, the restless soul, St. Augustine, the psychology of people, especially in democratic times, oscillating between brooding inwardness and like frenetic, competitive, envious outwardness. And so, this was not like a problem to be solved or a sickness to be cured. It was a condition to be endured and hopefully ameliorated wisely and prudently and soulfully in a way that would allow us to preserve what is in many ways otherwise very fragile arrangement. And as if with one voice, America rose up in 2017 and said, no, we wish to be crazier, more insane. So that put a ceiling on the number of units that could be moved. Like so many authors, I was reduced to the level of having to blast that email to everyone in the Rolodex, including people you hoped never to hear from again. Just begging, I really need those stars on Amazon, you guys. Like first week sales are so important. Like I need just degrading, and to this day, I see, people in some cases, like 20 years, my senior, like sending the email and it hits the inbox and you look at it and you can feel their pain. It just oozes off of the pleading email. And we'll come back to that in a minute. So I didn't like that. I didn't like having to sort of argue upstream of the culture. It was definitely not cool in that moment to be a sort of contrarian. It was like Hitchens had died at that point, I think. And when I was in DC, I paid my pilgrimage to Hitch, and I brought him a vintage boxed set of the Alexandria Quartet, a bottle of wine. The wine was gone at about before the bottle was upturned. He brought out a bowl of ice and a handle of Johnny Black, and he said, the first one I pull for you, and after that you're on your own. And, we just sat in the window of his flat, and the sweat gradually began, in the August heat, to just saturate his shirt and mine.
It's not a mystery why he died at the age that he did.
No, it is not. It is not. And so I got back from book tour with, the interview in the Washington Post, like Sunny Bunny, just like calling in every favor I could. And people were obliging, as they should have been. We were all sort of on the same page.
You were the most interesting person they knew.
It was the Obama years, the final gasp of the Obama years. And
which putative conservative were they going to call? Ken Ham? Like, what was the plan?
And no one really, there were no Trumpists really. Base didn't exist. Even nationalism was sort of like, oh, like Pep, you can't. And so I was trying to be, reasonable and trying to be interesting and trying to be accessible. And trying to do that all, in a way to kind of launder my graduate education. There were, so above the footnotes, it was very pop, and in the footnotes, it was very. I think Mark Hemingway in the Weekly Standard said that I cleaned out the Augean stables of political theory in the footnotes, which I appreciated. But nevertheless, when I got home, I hadn't worked really in about a month. There was no food in the fridge. I had no clean clothes. I didn't know what time zone I was in anymore. I had no circadian rhythms, like totally arrhythmatic. And I didn't know what to do. Do I just keep repeating myself? Do I come up with like new and dumber ideas and see how those do? It was totally exhausting and very dispiriting. And all I knew was that I couldn't keep doing what I was doing. And little did I know that within a very short period of time, American Affairs appeared. The American Mind became a thing that needed me. Matt Peterson basically
just really James Poulos made into a publication.
Well, Matt was told to recreate a West Coast Straussian blog, which the Claremont Institute had been doing back in the before times. And so he said, like, well, can I at least like hire someone so that it's not just like me in the closet, sort of like, have it staring at 1,000 yards. And the answer was yes.
Yeah.
So I came in about, I don't know, a month or two after this thing was conceived of. And suddenly, my fortunes had changed, and the country had changed along with me. I did do a little bit of TV still at that time. I used to do the trips out to New York and sort of like do Chris Hayes, and those guys.
I don't think I've ever seen one of these clips, and I'm going to immediately go hunt one down.
I can't stop you, and I won't stop you. But I did Larry King around that time, the 2018 era. He had a little studio in Glendale, and he was being syndicated by Aura, the Carlos Slim channel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was still like his self, like this, and with the suspenders and the sneakers under the table,
the Tolkien-esque age and gaunt face,
and so I really got to like figure out my intellectual relationship to Trump, like in real time on Larry King, and it was important at the time to be like, look, I'm not afraid. Like, why are people afraid of?
Seems like a nice guy,
Donald Trump. I mean, this is not, whatever it is, it's not going to be the apocalypse. And so it was not, because digital technology was the apocalypse, and not Donald Trump. So that's kind of just morphed into the era that we live in now. And the people are still all the same. A lot of folks have sort of changed hats or evolved, ascended to a higher level or a lower level.
Glenn Greenwald is more right wing than Jenna Goldberg now.
Yes, that's right. And Claremont's been great. Ryan very obligingly gave me 3 weeks to write the next book, Human Forever, which is somewhere looming over my shoulder,
staring at you.
So that was July of 2021. I wanted to do a shorter book. I wanted to do endnotes instead of footnotes, and I wanted to do something that would last, that would not just be pulped by one of the big 5 publishers, that would not require of me the email of debasement or abasement.
There's nowhere I can rate this book 5 stars.
There is, but if you go to canonic.xyz, where the book is exclusively sold, you can post onto the blockchain a review, which I would encourage you and everyone listening to or watching this little chat to do canonic.xyz. The book is Human Forever. Wrote it that July. Started printing in September of 21. A very few lucky folks got early copies, and the experience was totally different. This was a book that was only edited by Spencer Clavin at the Claremont Institute, the very erudite and very obliging Spencer Clavin, to whom I owe a debt, because you can't edit your own book no matter how much you want to. And privately printed, so no publishers freaking out, no editors seeing you rolling and hating, no paper supply. That became a problem. Paper supply challenges, logistical problems due to COVID. A lot of books, Christmas book season was almost canceled. People were freaking out. Didn't have to worry about those things. And on top of it all, posted immutably to the Bitcoin blockchain, which is nice. And we were able to NFT the hardcover, the premium super duper version of the book, which had not yet been done. I don't think it's been done again since. But people, well, wait a minute, you made $60,000 in 25 hours. What about my book? And it's like, well, what about you?
To clarify, you only sold 100 of those NFTs,
yes,
and
very limited edition,
$600 in BSV, which is a type of Bitcoin each.
Yes.
Okay.
The community came out and represented very strongly, and a totally different experience. And I was convinced to do this. It wasn't very hard to convince me to do it. It appealed to my, my desire to sort of create my own scene rather than trying to compete, to conform with a pre-existing scene. But really the medium is the message with the book. Yes, read the book. Yes, the content of the book is important. But still more important is what is being embodied and modeled with the book, which is, look, digital technology has advanced or developed to a point where you do not need to be a blue check. You do not need to be an expert. You do not need to be an Ivy League credentialed ethicist. You do not need to be, a sort of woke penitent of any kind. You do not need any special credential or expertise or capability in order to avail yourself of what's one of the most powerful digital tools in the world, which is Bitcoin, and use it to build digital institutions, new digital institutions where ordinary people who have their heads screwed on straight can create independently cultural artifacts, memorable, valuable, soulful artifacts, and build algorithmic markets and economies around them, enriching those with whom they freely associate.
Mm-hmm.
Very American. And how does Bitcoin work? It's called proof of work. And what that means is the way that you succeed in commanding compute to add your work onto the blockchain is by having computers compete to solve a math problem. And what could be more, Protestant than that? And we can argue all day about sort of denominations of Christianity and which is best suited to survive these times. But I think, we should all recognize that whatever else you can say about Protestantism, it's America, and America is going to remain a Protestant-inflected regime or civilization, certainly for a while at least. As someone who thinks that the Orthodox theologians basically got it right, I've made my peace with being among the 1% of observant Orthodox, and that's okay. I don't think America's going to collapse. I've got sufficiently, red and black pilled, not that it's anarchist and communist, but the other kind. James's 500 years of Protestant heresy coming to an end. The fathers returning. It's all, pack it in. You have no nation anymore. There's nothing but the monasteries. Go and code, or mine, I should say. And it's not that I find that argument to be unpersuasive. I find it to be perfectly persuasive. I mean, God punishes people every day. Like, why would 2022 be any different? And in fact, there's signs that it's not different at all, just more of the same. On the other hand, I'm an American. I'm stuck being an American, and I care about my country. I love my country, and I love its people, warts and all. And I love our humanity. I love being human. Being human is a precious gift. It's not bad news. And if we turn our back on those things, then we'll really, then the punishment will really come down. And we're already, reeling from the digital apocalypse as it is. And so I wanted to clearly demonstrate, show not tell to people that, I did this book because I was capable of just actually writing the thing, but there's nothing magical or special or alchemic. You just bring to the table what you have to bring to the table. You are good enough right now. And I think a lot of people need to hear that. And I think a lot of people want to hear that. And when they hear it inside their own head, they doubt that voice. They know no one's going to come save them. And in many cases, they're jumping up and down, waving money in their hands. Someone just point, give me the ball, point in a direction, tell me where to go. They want to assemble, they want to assemble with people like that. I mean, you wouldn't know it from the news, but still a majority of Americans embrace their country, its technology, and the biblical God, Christians. Who do not think that technology is evil, and do not think that America is bad. That's the majority in the U.S.
You said there's a digital apocalypse coming. Why shouldn't?
Oh no, it's already. I mean, it arrived like 2007. The iPhone. That was when.
And what did it do to America? What did it do to the world?
Well, gosh, I mean, look around. But really, what it did. I mean, we went from computers being these kind of tape decks that filled a warehouse to being things that fit on your desktop, to being things that fit in your hand. But what was going on at that time, more subtly in some ways, but considerably more powerfully in others, was computers, digital devices were becoming invisible. Most people's interactions with digital devices are with invisible ones: programs, algorithms, Wi-Fi, information packets flying through the air, violating the rules of human spacetime. We like to talk about five eyes. I always screw this up because it's math, but when I think of five eyes, I think of these digital entities, interoperable, instantaneous in their communication. 5G means zero latency, basically. So anything that's networked with anything else can kind of instantly communicate with it, violating the laws of human spacetime. Innumerable, really. How many of these things can dance on the head of a pin? That's three. Information entities, right? It's all info flying around. And then the fifth one, we'll fix it in post. There are five of them. But anyway, these are all things that until around 2007 or 2008, and maybe not even, maybe later than that, were only throughout all of human history capabilities associated only with angels and demons. And we have created technologies that can now do things and do things constantly every day without interruption that only spiritual beings were considered capable of doing.
And that changes human life not merely by tweaking the dials of speed on certain human phenomena. It's difference in degree. It's not difference in degree. It's difference in kind.
It's what David Bowie said. It's an alien invasion. We were waiting for the Hale-Bopp comet or for little gray men to beam us up. We didn't get beamed up. They beamed in. And they weren't, sort of scrawny little super spurg characters with enormous heads. In fact, they were not life forms at all. They're not alive. They are not ensouled. They were not created by God. They're very unlike you and me. They are indifferent to us. And they conquered the world in a way that no person or group of people can any longer conquer the world until further notice. Before they came along, it was TV land, and it wasn't about machine memory the way that it is now. It was about human imagination. Human imagination ruled the world. John Lennon sang about imagination would save us. Willy Wonka, pure imagination. Disney's Imagineers, George Lucas, Industrial Light and Magic. I mean, this was it. Whoever dreamed the biggest and best dreams deserved to rule the world and did rule the world. And that was America. That was the experience of technology that led the people who created digital tech to expect, and not just hope or not just believe, but truly expect that these devices would complete or consummate our form of rule of the best and purest dreams and fantasies across the entire planet. Bring everyone together. Everyone would basically become one of these televisual Americans, and it would end history. And that is what we thought happened. And when it turned out that maybe something else was going on, and that social media like got Donald Trump elected, kind of. Well, the powers that be did not like that very much, and we see how they reacted. Lockdown, literally, figuratively, prison lockdown, and we're gonna shut this down until we can figure out what the hell is going on. And they're just clawing back all of those, all those organizations. I mean, big tech. This is not just like quirky geniuses in their garage. Like, these were guys who figured out how to wrap military technology in an industrial code, in an entertainment coding, I should say, and sell it as consumer electronics to people, as imagination machines, genies in bottles. And now we're paying the price for that. And the military and intelligence folks who did all the R&D. I mean, cable television, touchscreen, GPS. I mean, every single thing that goes into a tablet or a smartphone, or a few other sort of elements of our communications infrastructure, it's all weaponry that's been repurposed. And we're like barbarians trying to eat a nice dinner with like a mace in one hand and an axe in the other. And it just doesn't work.
Or trying to have polite social interactions using weapons of war.
Yeah, and then like, oh, why are we hurting each other? Oh man, I don't know. Yeah,
I'm just touching you with the point of a spear at great velocity.
That's right. The spears have become autonomous. Yes. I mean, we've got a world that is swarming with autonomous weapons already. We just don't want to admit it. Marshall McLuhan was right. There's a deep-seated repugnance in the human breast. People do not want to understand what is going on around them, because it will, rub their nose in their responsibility for their share of what's going on.
And so can people fight this? The invasion that's happened? Is it too late?
It's over. Like, this isn't like, well, Uncle Ted says that if we just like mail some nail bombs to intellectuals, that like, no, like, not only is that obviously, a more great moral evil, it just doesn't.
You hear that, Mr. Fed?
Doesn't work. It just doesn't work anymore. I mean, it's, if you think that the hatred of the Second Amendment is intense, guns are worthless now. You can't overthrow the government. And even if you could, that would be bad too. So like, nobody needs these things. They do nothing but ill. They're evil. We should just get rid of them. If you think the hatred for the Second Amendment is bad, wait until people figure out that what we're going to be talking about for the next, 5 to 10 years is a Second Amendment for compute. Americans need and have a natural right to the free use of our most powerful digital technologies to freely associate and to create commercial and cultural value, period. And that is not what they have right now. And the SEC and the intelligence board and members of Congress and members of the administrative state are hell-bent on taking it away from them for good.
Why? Because the first time it felt like people had a taste of that, they elected Donald Trump?
Yeah.
Or said mean things about, immoral games journalists.
After Obama's re-election, the MIT Tech Review put out an issue of their very fancy magazine with a huge portrait of Bono on it, And a huge headline that said how big data will save politics. And on the eve of Trump's attempted reelection, the MIT Tech Review put out a quite different cover story, which was basically, how technology, how to save democracy from technology. Wow, how much has changed? Barack Obama himself, former president, told, I think, Ezra Klein on the eve of that election, that basically the internet is the biggest threat to our democracy. I mean, Mr. Selfie Stick himself, how things have changed. And it wasn't just Trump. It was, oh my goodness, populism, nationalism, yellow vests. I mean, Viktor Orban, all of these things. Oh my God, the internet is pulling ancient hatreds out of the ether and introducing them back into society. And it's like, well, if you understood the tools that you were creating, if you read just a little bit of McLuhan, you might understand that media have formative effects on our environment, on our inner and outer lives, on our senses and sensibilities, and our spirits, and maybe even our souls. And not in a way that like, oh, suddenly, racism is back, you guys. It's much more profound and sweeping than that. The last time that we lived in a media environment where recordation and recall was the most powerful form of communications technology, one that shaped and reformed the entire sort of cultural milieu or civilization in its image, was in the Middle Ages, in the scribal age, when you had
recordation and recall. Say what you mean by that.
Well, you had monk after monk sitting in, all these scriptoria, just sort of like remembering things and copying things and writing them down and preserving the wisdom and the knowledge of the ages. And now that we've automated that process, and it's a little clumsy because, these little guys write everything down. They record everything, all the photos, all the jokes, all of your tweets,
all your bad tweets,
everything, every single thing. It's a map that is larger than the territory, and those who are among our ruling factions want to use that power to control the map that is bigger than the territory, that is swallowing the territory. I mean, Google don't be evil and replaced it with organize the world's information. Well, why would you do that? Oh, to rule the world. Oh, okay. Got it. To create a new world that swallows this world, because human beings can't rule this world anymore. The bots got to it first. So they want to just go back a level and build a sort of sphere around the earth and control that sphere and control the swarm that is that sphere. I mean, Michael Crichton wrote a book called Sphere that is basically about this, alien thing lands in the ocean, team goes down, tries to figure out what it is. It's an intelligence that convinces them that they are, whatever they want to be, so that it can absorb them or whatever and have their power. We really need to recognize that the ancient things, the pre-modern things that are being retrieved, as McLuhan said they would be retrieved, are primal and cosmic and are not our friend. It's not about microaggressions. It's not about insensitive jokes. It is about the archetypal power of the serpent that eats its own tail, the thing that makes people say, like, I'm not going to have children, I'm not going to have a job, I'm not going to have a family, I'm not really going to do anything. It's a very primordial sort of nihilism. And the triumph of these bots raises the ultimate questions about who we are and why we should bother being who we are. People are reacting to that, and they're reacting to it theologically, because there's no more potent way to react. There's nothing else to hold on to under those circumstances than theology, than an understanding of the divine in your place in the cosmos of the divine. Who is your God? Who are you worshiping? That's what's dictating the pace of political change right now.
In a variety of different fantasy media, and I'm sure historically speaking as well, there's a concept that inside the city, which represents civilization, you do not bring weapons. You do not bear your weapons inside the city, because this is the civilized place. And like,
don't take your guns to town.
Right. We built all these cities, and we made it basically, you know, gauche or de rigueur to walk in with an AK-47 strapped across your back, but you can bring your cell phone. and then we wonder why all of the primal hatreds or allegiances that people feel come roaring back. You wouldn't question it if, you know, everyone started carrying swords around the city, and people just don't see these technological tools as that. They still think it's happy-go-lucky. We're all going to be connected around the world.
Well, they are mistakenly convinced that these things and all of the invisible stuff that flows out of them is ultimately rational. You know, well, it's math, it's code, and math and code are the bedrock of reality, and those things are rational. They're pure reason. You know, but if you just read a little Bertrand Russell, and he's like, well, there's really nothing more pleasurable and more purely human than to contemplate the austere beauty of mathematics. It's, you know, forget religion. That stuff is for idiots. Like, it's really just worshiping. I mean, contemplating mathematics. And it's true. I mean, just take five minutes, like reading about quantum physics. Like, there are no fundamental building blocks of reality. You keep zooming in, and what you find is like, there's like this energy thing, and then it like is interacting with something 5 light years away. Like, we don't get to understand this stuff. We can play with it and we can poke at it, but we can't master it and we can't create it. And what that tells me is that the foundation of the universe is God, and that we don't get to know everything. And that the foundations are not rational foundations; they are mysterious foundations. And if we are unable to live with that reality, we are going to drive ourselves insane trying to be rational, trying to explain it all. Explanation is not going to save us. People know this. I mean, I watch these, you know, well-meaning guys log on.
Facts and logic will preserve
these
all
guys
creation.
log on every day, and they're like, this post is the one, you guys, like, you must click on this post, you must watch my video, like, I'm going to explain everything to you, and this is the one. You can stop searching the full explanation. And it's like, bro, explanation is not what's going to save us. Life abides and resides in the implicit. It is the things that are unsaid in the conversation around the campfire that make the conversation around the campfire what it is. It is the things that cannot be expressed, that where you really experience, like, the love that you have for someone, or the love that you have for God. This obsession with vivisecting everything in order to try to master it, well, all that you end up with is like this corpse. And so, you know, the Googlers and the NSA people, and, you know, everyone in our ruling factions who thinks that that the best that they can do is to poke and prod this digital swarm, which is not alive but acts like it's alive, and learn from it by organizing the world's information, creating the biggest swarm, and then you start poking at it and learning what it does when you poke it in a certain way, and that's how you rule things. I mean, it's really, you know, it's like a death cult. It's an obsession with controlling the living through that which is not alive, and analogizing the living to that which is not alive, and treating the living as if ultimately it's really not alive. And, you know, it helps to be a Christian to understand these things, but you don't have to be. You can go straight back to Aristotle. I mean, fundamental thing for Aristotle is you've got biology and you've got physics. You get two different kinds of things.
Do you think that non-Christians
living animated
can
matter and not?
Do you think non-Christians can understand the war that you are talking about? This is one of the things that I've wondered, is that, you know, I have sort of a prop bet with someone that the things you talk about are more likely to be read 100 years from now than basically anyone else we know. And the reason why is because there's very, very few people in American life today that both understand technology and B, are Christian. And that without that second bit, you're grasping.
Well, and a lot of Christians are sort of don't understand things the way that they think they do either. Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, the sacraments are important. Apostolic authority is important.
So true, King.
You know, the repository of religious wisdom, the saints, are important. These are exemplars. These are not explainers, you know, explainers. These are exemplars. But look, you don't have to be a Christian to understand this stuff. But I suspect that it is very difficult to withstand it if you are not a Christian, because understanding what is happening to us is not entertaining. It's not a game. And the benefits of understanding are not the kind of benefits that make this world go round.
And why is Luddism not the answer?
It doesn't work. I mean, you can't
play like the Pennsylvania Dutch. Go live on a farm.
It's not like the old days when you could just march out into a field with your breech loader muskets and you take down a few redcoats and it's the shot heard around the world and everything changes. Everything doesn't change anymore. It's changed. That happened. And now what we need to do, it's much more important to understand what happened than it is to try to guess at what's going to happen. You have to look back in order to understand where you are right now, not look forward, not try to forecast, not try to prognosticate, not try to be a guru, not try to use your imagination. It's about using your human memory, which is distinct from and sacred in a way that machine memory is not.
Why? Because it's less correct?
Because it wasn't created by us. It's not a tool that we fabricated with expectations. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like the Sorcerer's Apprentice or the Monkey's Paw. I mean, this is just straight out of, you know, everyone from Goethe to Norbert Wiener. Careful what you wish for, you just might get it, and you might not actually like it, and it might turn out to like kill you or make you lose your mind or incapacitate you or cripple you. And that's what is happening to people. I mean, look around. Obesity up, testosterone down, sperm counts down, prescription drugs, people just locked in, never going to get off them again. Birth rates crashing. The nihilism is rampant, and it is just very difficult to face the world that we are stuck with unless you have the attitude of life is a trial and you must take up the cross. And if you are unwilling to bear the burden of the cross, of the sorrows of this world and the folly of man and our imperfections and our inability to escape our human being, and recognize in spite of it all that this is a precious gift, that our body and our soul must be inviolate and cannot be cast aside or vivisected or chopped up into bits or turned into Lego parts. Then how are you going to make it through? I don't know. You know, I mean, it's difficult for a Christian. A lot of Christians would prefer to, you know, Jesus is my friend and like life is exciting and I'm so like on fire with the Lord. And I'm not here to tell people to not feel that way, but I am here to tell them like you need depth of soul and you need to be spiritually prepared, not to be rewarded for your understanding of what has befallen us and our responsibility therein. The rewards are, you know, God is watching. And if you are going to reorient or orient your life around that which is most eternal and blessed in us, those things are invisible. You know, we have sort of superpowers too. It's not just the bots. Yes, they're invisible. Yes, they can be everywhere at once. But we have souls and we are a community of souls and a community of the living and the dead. And, you know, people get sort of bent out of shape when I say like, oh, well, you know, don't worry. Like the bodily resurrection is coming, you know, when God the Father says it's coming. So we don't need to worry about trying to bring heaven to earth or trying to, you know, immanentize the eschaton or trying to live forever. You know, it's all been taken care of. And sometimes people look at me as if I'm trying to get a rise out of them, and maybe I am. But is that any crazier than like, don't worry, soon we'll figure out how to siphon our consciousness out of ourselves and spit it into an invisible machine, and then we'll live forever and become as gods. I mean, Stuart Brand was banging on about this stuff decades ago. Yeah. We've become as gods, and we better get used to it. Sir, I'm sorry, but we are human beings, and how about we get good at that first?
That machine killed you and is impersonating you. You have not transferred your soul into it. It's always a fun litmus test is asking people what exactly they think happens when you transfer your consciousness to a machine.
These people can't even explain what consciousness is, and that's because it defies explanation.
Yeah.
Sorry, scientists, you are out of a job.
But what does reconciliation I'll put it this way, society, if, man's relationship to technology was as it ought to be, what would that look like? Would those exist? Would paint a picture?
Well, this is really a little too much like Imagineering for me. And I know the temptation is always there. The temptation is always there to say, if only, if only, if only, if only, if only my great idea was, if only everyone did what I wanted them to do, then we'd be okay. There is no okay. There are no guarantees. Life is a risk, dog. Like, you just have to pick up that cross and start walking. There is no solution. This is not a sickness to be cured. It's not a problem to be solved. It's not an equation to be balanced. It is life, and it is a mess. And the only joy and glory that is to be found in this life is by fearlessly subjecting yourself to the trial of life with as much love and grace as you can muster, regardless of how painful it is and regardless of how much you are made to suffer.
So technology, especially digital technology, is yet another heavier weight for humanity to train itself against and become strong enough to repel.
It is a level of responsibility that few are prepared to accept.
Mm-hmm.
Responsibility comes from an ancient word, probably 12 to 15,000 years old, meaning the repeated pouring out of sacrificial libations. Responsibility is a fundamentally theological concept. Who are you pouring out your libations to?
Mm-hmm.
And people don't want to talk about that. They don't want to really sit down and be honest about who or what it is that they're pouring out their libations to. And a lot of people are like, oh, don't worry, I'm not worshiping false gods. I worship idols of my own creation. I'll be okay. Would that it were so simple.
It's not Satan, it's just me.
So, it's too easy to say oh, these devices are demonic. And it's like, well, no, they're not. We created them, and we don't have the power to create demons. Demons have the power to mess with us. They don't want to mess with our technology. They want to mess with us. If 2,000+ years of Christian civilization is to be believed. And I have more important things to do than cast skepticism on the wisdom of the ages in that regard. Rather than trying to imagine the best technological arrangements, what we need to do is remember who we are. And if we remember who we are, then the rest will follow, I think.
And James, how do people keep up with who you are? Where can they buy your book? How do they buy your book if they are so inclined? Which eldritch passage in the East do they have to take?
If you want to be on the Human Forever mailing list, you can go to humanforever.us. If you want to simply get the book into your hot little hands, the paperback, for the low price of the equivalent of 30 Fed bucks, that's canonic.xyz.
And if you'd like one of the NFTs, you can pay me $1 million.
Yes. There's still a few NFTs on the secondary market. You can buy one of those, resell it for, a Google dollars. And then, I should say a word about Return, which is the new tech lifestyle publication that I've founded.
Full-throatedly refused to spell with a V. Despite
this is not this is not about the pre-Christian era. This is about the era in which we live right now, where still a majority of Americans are Christians, and where people understand that technology and theology are what are set the tempo and the pace and the character of life today, and determine the course of our politics. But this isn't like a super intellectual publication. Obviously, it's, if you're smart and think about things, this will reward you. It's a tech lifestyle publication. No one wired, who cares? There's this huge gap there, and it's not just Trump voters. It's many more millions of people than that who recognize that there's something rotten in Denmark, and recognize that these technologies have eaten the world and that it touches everything. And they want to find each other and coordinate together culturally and economically on creating quintessentially American institutions on a digital footing, so that we can survive and thrive in this world that has been forced upon us. So it's a website, return.life. There's a print quarterly that's coming next month for members only. And if you want to become a member, you can do so at subscribe.return.life.
And I heavily encourage everyone to do so. I just read my first piece since the publication launched in the publication yesterday, right after we taped with Jeremy Carl. And it's great. It's good stuff. I don't know where else I would read it. There's no one else who would publish this.
The answer is nowhere.
Yeah.
It's just us.
Yeah. Look, the last time a publication you edited came across my eyes, we ended up creating this entire organization. A piece in the American Mind was the genesis of American Moment. So it is likely to be influential. You seem to have the Midas touch when it comes to these things.
Well, I mean, to be quite honest, like there's really no substitute for just like getting kicked around over the course of your life.
Yeah.
You must have the experience of trying and failing and being blindsided and having tragedy. I mean, you have to get your kicked.
Yeah. However hard you think your career has been, Mr. Poulos here has experienced quite a bit. And where can people follow you personally?
On the streets of Los Angeles. No. So, Twitter, at James Poulos, DMs are open.
Yeah.
I ignore you if you are a freak, unless you're the right kind.
Yeah.
And what else? I mean, there's the American Mind, of course, americanmind.org. That has a Twitter. So many social media platforms. People will find them if they want to.
They're so inclined.
Yeah.
James, thank you for stopping by.
It's a pleasure.
I told you that would be a wild ride, and I think that you would concur. I would highly recommend trying to go purchase a copy of the paperback Human Forever. Go subscribe to return.life and pay attention to the American Mind and the Claremont Institute. All three of those are institutions and publications and published works, I guess, that are worth your time. We wouldn't be where we are today without many of them. As always, you can follow us at ammoment.org on all social media. You can go to americanmoment.org to find out everything we have cooking, and you can rate and review this podcast 5 stars. It really does help us out. Thank you guys, as always, for listening, and we will see you next week. Moment of Truth is an American Moment Studios production filmed at the Conservative Partnership Center. Our podcast is produced and edited by Jake Mercier and Jared Cummings. Our intro music is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all platforms, and you can go to americanmoment.org to learn more.